been in my Latin class for many, many, many years, and then gradually has branched out as far as her linguistic curiosity through like our travel to Japan, and originally started this project kind of envisioning I'm going to learn Korean in just 3 months, and then it quickly shifted, and there was a lot of trying to figure out what it is, but Nadia has always been a great observer of the things that get missed. And so ultimately she ended up settling on this project about not just things that get missed, but people that get missed, whether it's in our history classes or just in society as a whole. So without further ado, Nadia.
Hello everyone, my name is Nadia Wilson, and my project is called Survival is a Must, Korean Women's Poetry Throughout History. My advisors for this were Mr. Ryan, as we saw, Ms. Kay, and Ms. Minji Kim. Before we begin, I do have to issue a content warning. This presentation will contain morbid and controversial themes, details of war and oppression, and then photos of casualties and death. If any of these might upset or offend you, then I strongly encourage you to exit for the duration of this presentation. Thank you. Okay. Brief introduction of what we're getting into. First and foremost, this project is about the oppression of women seen in Korea since the 1300s. I went over how that oppression is represented throughout poetry, and then I also created my own final products, despite it not necessarily being something required of me, like a research paper. Before we get into that though, why should you care about this? Well, first of all, oppression is happening now, everywhere, all around the world. For example, in Yemen, women in Yemen only have about a half of a single percentage point of representation in their government. On top of that, there is gender-based violence, and then the average amount of education that Yemen women receive is only about 2.5 years. That's first grade, second grade, and then half of third grade. That is absolutely not enough. Next, we do have to raise awareness of these other cultures. Sometimes the treatment that women go through is based off of a belief system, i.e. religion. And so we just have to make sure that we know about those. For example, there's an Indonesian tribe, the Dani, who whenever a loved one dies, they actually have their women amputate the top knuckle of their fingers. It symbolizes the permanence of loss, and it shows their grief for that loved one. Keep in mind though, men don't have to do that. They can grieve however they see fit. Overall, knowledge is power. If we provide knowledge to people who have the ability to change things, then it increases the likelihood that they will change things. Okay. What did I actually look at for my entire thing? Well, first I looked at how literary devices represented certain ideas of love. Then I also looked at how the authors of these poems reflected their own identities and roles in their works. Some methodology. This is a historical project, as Ms. Cohen introduced it earlier. And because of that, I had to look at how something changed over the course of 3 time periods. In order to figure out which time periods I wanted to use, I had to search up keywords such as oppression and women in Korea. And then in order to find out even more information about that, I had to look up keywords such as Korean War and Korean women. Then I had to actually choose what poems I wanted to actually analyze, and so I had to have criteria for that. That criteria was that they all had to have an English translation, and they all had to have a consistent theme. In this case, I chose the theme of love. All right, let's go over my literature review. Just a brief overview of what eras I actually chose. Up first, we have the Joseon Dynasty. The Joseon Dynasty is considered the golden age of Korea because of a bunch of reforms that were made to the government in the 1500s. One such example is the invention of Hangul. Hangul is the Korean alphabet that King Sejong created. It was made specifically to be easy to learn, and it allowed the common people to get back a few of those freedoms that they were missing because they could now actually read what laws and policies said. Some general facts about their lives. People led grueling, labor-filled lives because they had to keep up with certain taxes and fees that were just put upon them randomly. And then women at these times were expected to be housewives. So they had to bear children, just do household chores. They couldn't necessarily do anything significant. The main reason that I chose the Joseon Dynasty is because it included kiseng. Kiseng were entertainers of this era. They would have patrons come into these kiseng houses and they would provide tea services, and then they would also perform to music and dance, recite poetry, hold nightmares. These kiseng were trained at a very young age. Their careers actually started when they were 8. It peaked at 16, and then they retired early at 22. My next era, the Japanese Colonization of Korea. I myself didn't even know that this existed until my advisor told me about it. So what is this? The beginning of this era began with a war over Korea between Japan and Russia. Japan obviously won, and in 1904 declared Korea a protectorate state under them. Then in 1910, they actually declared Korea an official colony under them. At first, the Japanese only took away the rights. So things like freedoms of press, freedoms of speech, freedoms of assembly, freedoms of association. Then they went on to what is known as ethnocide or cultural genocide. This included burning Korea's historical documents and their textbooks, outlawing Hangul, that Korean alphabet, replacing Korean schools with Japanese sanctioned institutes, and then one of the big things was actually making the Koreans change their Korean names into ones that sounded more Japanese in nature. One of the main reasons that I actually chose the Japanese colonization of Korea was the inclusion of comfort women. Comfort women are women who, at the time, were forced into sexual slavery. Japanese soldiers would come in and actually kidnap them off the street, or they would lure them in under false pretense of work or education. Once they were kidnapped, they would be taken to comfort stations, which is a blanket term for brothels. At those brothels, these women had to follow every single order that the Japanese soldiers gave them, or risk being beaten or murdered. My third era that I chose was the Korean War, and then a little bit of the aftermath. In 1945, the United States and Russia split Korea along the 38th North Parallel. They didn't take into account the fact that the North and the South had two very different lands, and thus interrupted the way that their society actually worked. They also didn't take into account the fact that they were teaching them two completely different modes of life, that being communism and capitalism. And then, one of the worst parts, they didn't take into account the fact that the Koreans didn't want to be split up. They just came in and ruined everything. In 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea. It's said that up to 2.5 million civilians have died over the course of this war. Let that sink in. Millions. Here I've got a few pictures from the war itself. First, we have a fallen Chinese soldier. Then we have soldiers and supplies being parachuted into battle. Then we have North Korean soldiers awaiting a medic. In 1953, an armistice was signed. One of the main ideas of this armistice was the establishment of the DMZ, also known as anti-militarism, also known as one of the most dangerous places on the planet. This war is still ongoing. An armistice is essentially just like a pause, really. The main reason that I actually chose this era was because of the effects that it had on the Korean civilians. Many women were left widowed because of how many soldiers died, and then on top of that, the children would be left fatherless. Take into account the amount of civilians that died, well, children were often left orphaned. Okay, now to get into the actual poems that I analyzed, I will be reading them out to you. First we have Hanjin's Long Remembrance. This is a shijo from the Joseon Dynasty. I'll cut a piece from the waist, this interminable 11th movement, and wind it in coils beneath the side covers, warm and fragrant as spring breeze. Coil by coil to remind you the night my lover returns. Next we have Kim Young-soon's On Evenings is Common Silk. This was written in the Japanese Colonization of Korea. On evenings of common silk, on fields woven yellow and blue, the lark sings the day's song, up in glowing midair, such are evenings of the moon. To twilight skies slowly gleaming, like my mother's tears of joy, I look up, silent, miserable, and confess a great pain, such are evenings of thin rain. Like a springtime skirt tucked away, glimmering curtains of darkness fall upon a blanket, a universe is shredded with rain, such are evenings of thin rain. Next we have Kim Hae-soon's Regarding Love Month. This is one of her more tame poems. If you'd like to check out any of her other ones, they are very bold. This was written in the aftermath of the Korean War. He opens the window, puts his hand inside my heart, and pumps out water. When I open the door because I feel like running away, he manages to get near me, opens the window, and hauls the water from my heart. As he pumps and pumps, I stagger, blacking out. He opens the window, throws a hot coal into my empty heart, and says, "Follow me, follow me." All right, now to get into what I actually looked at from those poems. Looking at question 1, which was how literary devices represented certain ideas of love in their poems. For each section, I have 3 sections, we will look at one of the poems, as we don't have time to look at all 3. First, I looked at diction and metaphor. So, diction is like the tone of the certain words that they used. So again, this was set after the Korean War, and I've highlighted up here in blue what I would like you to focus on for this part. We can see here that water, instead of blood, fills the person's heart. Then her lover reaches into the heart and pulls out water through windows. Well, windows in poetry are oftentimes used as metaphors for eyes. From there, we can conclude that the lover is causing her to cry incessantly at them. Then, from there, we can infer that Kim Hae-soon is talking about an abusive relationship because it is unrelenting and the lover will not let her go, no matter how hard she tries. The next section I looked at was tone and vocabulary. I've highlighted here in yellow the more lighthearted, fun words, and then in green, the more dark, pessimistic ones. You can kind of see that at the beginning, it's more light, and then as you go down, more dark comes out. This creates a dichotomous tone. From here, we can conclude that Kim Young-soon, this is Kim Young-soon's poem is what we're looking at. From there, we can infer that Kim Young-soon is talking about how love sometimes is good, sometimes is bad. It's never the same. It's more unpredictable and consistent, like a roller coaster. The next one is looking at the rhyme and the rhythm of the certain poems. For this, we are using Hanjin's poem, the shijo. A little bit of background about shijo. Kiseng would actually put them to music and then perform them. So they had to have some sort of lyrical aspect, and usually it included some rhyme. Up here I've included and highlighted a little bit of the rhyme scheme you can see. So, da, ran, da, lra. Shijos are short, sweet, and metaphorical. She oftentimes treated her patrons like she would a shijo. Her interactions with them would be short and, like I said, metaphorical. Her guests would leave feeling great about themselves, but there was never enough time to actually form a bond with them. From here, we can conclude that she was showcasing the idea that love, while at the beginning it can be great, it's not permanent, it can be temporary. All right, looking at question 2, which was the reflection of what their identities and roles were. First, we will look at Hwang Jin-hee. Hwang Jin-hee was a kisang from the Joseon Dynasty. She was very highly educated. She actually learned how to read and write, which was very impressive for a woman at the time. Because she was able to learn to read and write, she got really good at writing shijo. Her shijo work became so good that it lasted through history, and now she is known as one of the most renowned kisangin poets in Korean history today. Because of this, she was able to establish her identity as a scholar. Next is Kim Young-soo. She grew up in the Japanese Colonization of Korea. She actually got to go to school in Japan, which is where she learned how to write poetry. Eventually, she grew up and she traveled around the world, but then she came back to Korea, and there was a nationalism wave going on. There was people's ways of rebelling against the Japanese government. She hopped on with the bandwagon and actually got caught up in the nationalism wave herself and began writing about Korea and using references to Korea in her poetry. Because of that, she was able to fulfill her role as a nationalist writer. Next is Kim Hye-soon. She is still alive today and lectures at Korean universities. Kim Hye-soon grew up in the Reformation period after the Korean War. During this period, women gained the ability to publish works and all of that, but were generally expected to write their poems or their literature using pretty diction and using references to nature. As her own form of rebellion, Kim Hye-soon decided, no, I'm going to use vulgar language and paint really uncomfortable pictures for my readers. So, because of that, she was able to fulfill her identity as an autonomous woman. Why does that matter? What are some conclusions we can gain from that? Well, first, many time period specific factors influence the development of poetry that we see today. Authors were able to depict what their roles and what they wanted their identities to be in their works themselves. And then Hwang Jin-hee, Kim Young-soon, and Kim Hye-soon actually inspired other authors, female authors, to fight against the inequality that they experienced in Korea in their societies. What's the final message we can gain from that? Resist in any way you can. No matter how small it may feel, your words do have an impact. All right, looking at some more technical aspects. Some challenges that I faced during this. Like I said, in the Reformation era, the women actually got the ability to publish. So that means that the first 2 periods, they didn't have the ability to publish. And so that made it really hard to find female poets and poems to analyze. And then on top of that, there's the language barrier. Unfortunately, I am not anywhere near fluent in Korean. And so I had to rely on English translations. English translations, though, it can be a little and so I had to rely on it, unfortunately. Then my internship, I actually got to participate in teaching Miss K's 7th graders shijo. Shijo, again, was that form of reading poetry. I got to assist in her lectures about it, and I got to actually help the kids when they practiced taking apart the shijos, so like finding syllables, line breaks, themes, all of that. And then I got to help out when they were writing their own shijo. This greatly benefited me because I got to actually learn more about the shijo and understand it better. which helped me with my final products because I set myself a challenge that I wanted to write my own shijos. Speaking of my final products, for my final products, I actually wrote a research paper, which you can access here if you so desire. There's nowhere near enough time for me today to actually explain everything that I got to learn during this research and all of that. And so I compiled it all in a research paper. Thank you, Simon. And then I actually wrote my own miniature collection of poetry. This poetry, you can access that here. It follows the themes, styles, and literary devices that you can see during these time periods. And it's kind of dark. And I would be actually reading you two of my favorite poems that I wrote. So up first we have Pomegranate. This one is set in the Japanese Colonization of Korea and is from the perspective of a comfort woman. Pitter patter goes the rain, flap flap go the wings, rustle rustle go the leaves. Everything's happening, yet nothing at all. Ephemeral happiness and the left for sake. Tied together, the girls and I. We chatter, we wince. The ache is back. Maybe it's good. I hope so. I want to feel. The soldier comes, seizes my wrists. In the tent, we sit. He hands me his pomegranate, says, take the seed, like you're supposed to. I don't want the seed. Next, we have Where Are You?, which is based in the aftermath of the Korean War from the perspective of an orphan. Before I read it, I have to say, Ama is what Korean children call their mothers, and Appa is what they call their fathers. Ama, Appa, are you there? I want to see you again, impossible and indeed. The daisies bloomed. Are you here to see? The drums are loud, and there's dirt under my nails. Ama, Appa, where are you? That concludes my presentation. I would like to say muchas gracias, TV algo no esperaron. I would like to say 정말 감사합니다, K 선생님과 윤지연이. And thank you to all my teachers. Without your aid, I wouldn't be able to do any of this. And thank you to Ms. Poland and the Senior Project Committee for helping me with the proposal and the blogging process, just refining everything. And then thank you to everyone in the audience for attending and listening to something that I think is really important to know about. Here are my sources. Are there any questions?
Questions from the audience?
When you were researching your poetry and choosing through them, did you choose them like based on the most popular styles at the time? Like, did you go with that or just impactful?
A little bit of both. So the Joseon Dynasty, Shijo was the most popular form of poetry, and I thought that it was a really cool form. And so that's why I chose the Shijo, plus it was by Japan. And then during the Japanese colonization and the Korean War, poets just kind of went on their own way and decided to use more free verse. I actually go a little bit over that in my research paper. I'm trying to remember what exactly I said, but that's why.
Luke?
So when you were writing your poetry, were you more focused on the experience of the historical moment or that kind of backlog of existing Korean poetry? And how did you make the decision to either borrow from that rhythm or to just kind of go authentically with like your own voice on those poems?
I tried to focus and replicate how the perspective of the person I was trying to write from would have been. So I just really tried my hardest to capture that feeling that they would have evoked and just display what they would have been going through. And then, sorry, what was the second part?
No, I think that's
Olivia?
How did you choose to focus specifically on Korean poetry as a means to explore oppression throughout history?
Well, like Mr. Ryan how far a beginner could learn Korean, like the language, as my project, but then I had to change it because it wasn't viable as a research project or any of the other projects. From there, I wanted to keep the theme of Korea, and I found out that there was a lot of oppression of women, and the oppression of women is something that I myself am actually a little more passionate about than I think people expect. So I wanted to showcase that here.
Thank you.
Did this project change how you feel about poetry?
No? Unpopular opinion, but I really enjoy poetry, just taking it apart, trying to find the meanings behind everything. Again, I know it's a little bit of an unpopular opinion, but I love it, and I love writing my own. So,
Do you ever attempt to write your poetry in Korean?
I really wanted to, but I didn't have time. And so I was going to actually translate the Where Are You poem into Korean, but like I said, not enough time. It would have been really impactful if I did. So maybe that's what I'll do next.
All right, let's thank Nadia. And let's thank all 15 of our senior project